The worst thing you can do to me is lie to me. I guess if you hit me with a hammer or shot me in the head, that would be worse. But if you lie to me, and by you I mean human beings and institutions, whatever it may be, that's it. I have a hard time coming back from that. Now, as a Christian, I'm supposed to forgive, and I do. And somebody says, I'm really sorry about that falsehood. Yeah, but it's always in my mind, because lying is so easy to do. And it's so common in our society, but it's just such a deleterious thing. You got to be able to stand up and tell the truth. Now, routinely, both political parties mislead us, and they do it on purpose. They have propaganda arms. You know all that. Lies, well, you can debate one way or the other, but people do lie. Politicians, powerful people lie. There's no doubt about that. And tonight we're going to expose a huge lie. And that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So the Democratic Party is holding up the spending bill, which is expiring Friday at midnight. And the government will have to partially shut down. We do this every 2 months, right? But here's why they're holding it up. Because Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries really want to gut the Homeland Security apparatus and ICE in a specific way. They want to neutralize it so that Homeland Security will have a far more difficult time controlling undocumented migrants already in this country. That is what the Democratic Party wants. Okay, let me prove it to you. So Schumer and Jeffries say, we're not going to fund Homeland Security. ICE is already funded. Unless you do the following. No masks for ICE agents. Now, that's already been adjudicated in California. Federal judge says ICE agents can wear masks. 2, judicial warrants when a migrant is taken into custody. That is impossible. There are 15 million illegal aliens in this country. You couldn't possibly get a judge to sign off on every one of them. No immigration enforcement near hospitals, schools, churches. That means in a city, you could not have any enforcement. And finally, agents must wear body cameras. Okay? All right. And there's another one, it's a little murky, that any kind of action against migrants must be shared with local authorities, which, of course, gives the authorities the opportunity to tip off the migrants or the groups involved, which, of course, they would in the radical left states. All right, so that's what's in play. It's not going to happen. So the Republicans are going to say, we're not going to do this. And I don't know if the compromise will be reached. I assume it will be. Okay. So the rational conclusion about all these demands is the Democratic Party doesn't want any enforcement. They just don't. They want amnesty. But that has been the position of the Democratic Party for decades. Amnesty. Anybody here who's not a criminal should be allowed to stay. But now it's violent criminal. This is the big lie. You ready for the big lie? Here it comes. So the Democrats are saying just 14% of migrants that have been detained by ICE are violent criminals. Roll it.
It's not getting rid of the worst, which, by the way, less than 14% have been accused or have been convicted of violent crimes that are in holding right now with DHS, with ICE.
That is misleading in the extreme, and I don't know whether Leslie Marshall knows that or not, but she certainly hasn't done her research. Now, that 14% figure comes from a CBS News report that is totally erroneous. Why? Well, here are the non-violent crimes that don't fall under the 14%. Drug trafficking and use, DWI, all crimes of theft, all crimes of fraud. In addition, child pornography, endangerment, and child trafficking. are not considered violent crimes. So we told you yesterday that Honduran migrants control the entire drug traffic in San Francisco and parts of Oakland, California. They wouldn't be subject to ICE detention because selling heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, not violent crimes, according to Democrats. Not violent. Nope. Sell the fentanyl, guy dies. Nah, it's not violent. See what the fraud is? You see what the big lie is? When people hear this, they go, ICE is rounding up just poor farmers, poor hotel workers. Only 14% are violent criminals? Oh. What a lie. Okay, so the federal government, their stat is a little bit different. It says that 60% of all the undocumented people have been detained by Homeland Security, have committed some kind of criminal offense. That is probably true. Okay? Now, a criminal offense could be not showing up for a hearing, could be a lot of things. But if you are here illegally, you have snuck in or overstayed your visa, and you commit any crime, out of here. Right? Okay. So that's what we're dealing with here, a massive deception, and the press picks it up and runs. I don't know how many times I've heard the 14%. Why does CBS report that? I have no idea, but they're so lazy, these people. See, we researched all this. When we heard the 14, we went, no, that can't be possible. And then we come in, and it wasn't hard to find the classifications of different kinds of crimes. So this is a huge fraud. So summing up, Democratic Party doesn't want enforcement against undocumented migrants unless they're killers, rapists, or people like that. So if you're a fentanyl, heroin, cocaine dealer, come on. I'm not going to bother you. That's the memo. All right, now to foreign money inciting violence inside the USA. We're all over this story, and I haven't seen a lot of reporting on it. So yesterday there was a hearing in front of the House Ways and Means Committee about how foreign money coming into radical left groups being used to pay protesters or agitators, better word, to go to places like Minneapolis and cause trouble. LA, Portland, Oregon. So the money comes from a guy named Neville Roy Singham. This is the big guy. Lives in China, Shanghai. He's a communist. And he is raising hundreds of millions of dollars to destabilize the U.S. government. And joining us now from Washington, Washington is Congressman Kevin Hern from Oklahoma, who was a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. What did you learn yesterday in this hearing?
Well, thanks, Bill, for having me.
Sure.
You know, it's the old saying, follow the money. And we've talked about this for years. We've had the opportunity under the Biden administration and now the Trump administration to refer some 11 cases to the IRS for investigation. This hearing validated this through our witnesses. Even the Democrat witness was caught in a lie about his nonprofit, his foundation being funded by a nonprofit that was funded by a billionaire from Switzerland. So foreign money coming in, motivating these folks to go out and do what they're doing, protesting against ICE, trying to break up, what we're trying to do as far as sending people back, as you just alluded to. The Democrats have consistently wanted illegals to be able to stay here. When you look at the vote today we're having on the SAVE Act to say you need to be a legal citizen, you need to show your voter ID whenever you go, your ID to go vote. We're trying to push back on this narrative that, illegals are going to run this country. And the 501c3s that are out there that have been put forth by these foreign billionaires to fund these riots, to fund these protests, has got to stop. And that's what we're doing. We're investigating every one of them.
Okay, but it's not just Democrats. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent could have started revoking 501cs in October, and he didn't do it. and he won't talk about it. Every time you ask him, he runs away. Now, he made some kind of thing last week where he's going to try to get a big investigative unit, but that's 6 months ago, and he doesn't seem to be too bullish on this thing. President Trump himself asked me for information. I don't know whether you know this or not, which I handed over to him as an American citizen, not as a journalist. But he asked me, he says, give me the names of the 501cs that are taking Singham's money and the billionaire from Switzerland you mentioned, and others. There are others all over the country, world doing this. Give me the names of them, and we'll revoke their 501cs, which I did. But it doesn't seem to me to be a compelling issue in Congress right now. And most of it's the Democrats' fault, but not all.
No, you're exactly right. That's why we're having these hearings. We're going to have more to point out the issues. You probably saw the exchange with the Democrat witness yesterday where he was caught in a lie about, again, the funding of his organization. We had great witnesses on the panel that answered all the questions. The Democrats didn't want to talk about anything as far as fraudulent funding with the 501c3s. All they wanted to talk about are tariffs and President Trump's an evil person. Republicans don't care.
Right.
We'll dig through this and we'll find the information to give Secretary Besant to do his job over there.
Now, as a member of Congress, do you really believe that most of your Democratic peers in the House want to give amnesty to bad foreign nationals? Do you believe they want to do that?
No, but they detract from the actual issue, because I think when you get from away from the camera for a political piece, when they look at the policies, they will tell you that this is bad politics. In fact, after the hearing, many of the Democrats said, we've got to work on fixing this. This is an atrocity for America. They wouldn't say that at the hearing and on the camera, but behind the scenes, they know this is devastating for the freedoms of Americans, all Americans, because it can cut both ways. And that's something that we need to protect. It's our job in Congress. And that's what, again, when we're having these hearings, and build not just the not-for-profits, the for-profits also. We've got sovereign wealth funds that are funding litigation against companies and not paying any taxes on it, taking the money back to Saudi Arabia and elsewhere to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. And I've got a bill out there, a third-party litigation funding act, that goes after these particular situations to expose them for what they're doing, which is, quite frankly, to our financial system is just as devastating. It's driving up insurance costs for companies and for individuals across America. And we're not trying to stop any of the lawsuits that are going on, but we want transparency. We want to make sure that these foreign actors are paying their appropriate taxes. Most are not paying any taxes at all on these big multi-million-dollar lawsuits. So there's a whole host of things we need to be looking at when it comes to foreign actors. And both of these are really devastating to the American economy and to the American people.
Real briefly, because I want to get to the voting thing. When you say they're not paying any taxes on litigation, most people don't understand what you mean.
Yeah, so they have a sovereign wealth fund. They come in, they call it a capital asset to pre-fund a lawsuit. Meaning, like, let's just take a sovereign wealth fund from the Middle East. They'll come in and set up a fund and call it a capital investment. And then whenever it settles, they'll call it a capital gains. Well, capital gains are not paid by foreign individuals that are not U.S. citizens. So we're saying that
they make money here in our capitalistic system. They don't pay taxes. They ship the money back to whatever country they're from.
Correct. And even the local sovereign wealth funds or the wealth funds in the United States that set these up for litigation, they get them classified as capital gains as opposed to ordinary income. And so we're going after both of these.
I got it. Okay. It's more of a grift than anything else. Now I'll go back to your peers on the Democratic side of the aisle in the House. It's inexplicable they wouldn't want to know who's voting, but they're opposing the SAVE Act. They don't want voter ID. Do you believe most of these people on the Democratic side really believe that that's good for the country?
Let's go back to the 2020 census when President Trump tried to get a question in there, are you a U.S. citizen or not? That's where it starts. Who's in the household? Because that's the Apportionment Act that determines how many members of Congress you have in each state and where they are. And so that was contested by Democrats and then ultimately was set aside where we couldn't have their language in there. Now here we are. We're having, first of all, the SAVE Act, which says you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote in our elections.
Which is the law already.
It is the law. And then
Right.
on top of that is to have an ID, like we do in Oklahoma, to identify yourself when you go up to cast your vote. Certainly in federal elections, we have that responsibility. We have the opportunity to do that, and that's what we're going to be voting on today.
Yeah, and Democrats oppose that. Why?
Well, again, they're trying to protect the illegal immigrants in this country because they know that most of those are going to support the Democrats because the Democrats are supporting illegal immigration. And quite frankly, some of the people that are most put out by this or upset by this are the people who've done the legal immigration the right way. I just sent out a letter yesterday to my staff and others that for the last 25 years, we've legalized anywhere between 750,000 and 1 million people a year going through the system that we've always had. And so it's not that we're against immigration, we're against illegal immigration. And
Yeah, sure. I mean, the pathway, but you guys should pass a new updated immigration law, that's for sure. You're relying on 1952. Last question.
But it's still, Bill, it's still allowing almost 1 million people a year to come through the process.
Okay,
And,
but it needs to be... It needs to be more sharply defined as far as enforcement and penalties. That's what it needs. Right now, it's all over the place. And the states are obviously ignoring it in many, many instances. Last question. Do you believe that these organizations inside the United States, both nonprofit and profit, you believe the Justice Department is going to start to crack down on these people who are absolutely paying agitators to break down our system? Is that going to happen?
Yeah, to my knowledge, the first time since I've been here for almost 8 years that we've had a hearing on just this in Ways and Means to talk about the taxation policy, because this is a non-issue if the 501c3s are stripped of their non-tax status. And so we're going after that direction. There's been obviously very politicized hearings on judiciary and oversight on these, but we're going after it from a tax standpoint, which I think is really brings in the Treasury Department, also from the DOJ standpoint. If Treasury is involved, we have a dual attack on these folks doing this. That if for the first time, certainly since in my adult life, we're doing things that haven't been done before. So I think we're going to be successful. We have a close working relationship with Secretary Bessent and the president, so we're going to make sure we move forward.
All right, if you see the secretary, tell him to come on this program because he's been disrespectful to us, and that's not good. Anyway, Congressman, we hope you will come back as well when anything significant happens. We really appreciate your time. Here's the final thought of the day. If you watch television news, it's all Nancy Guthrie all the time. And it's speculation, and I can't watch it. And I don't really have to because I got a staff that's, funneling me hard news. And if it's hard news, I certainly pay attention to it. So why is this story so mesmerizing to so many Americans? Number one, it's about mom. Okay, mom is the core of all families. Number two, there's a celebrity involved, Savannah Guthrie, the Today Show lady. And number three, it's a mystery. So you got a nice house in Arizona outside of Tucson, and all of a sudden, the lady who lives there, Nancy Guthrie, disappears. And nobody knows where she is, and now there's allegedly ransom, and it's a mystery. It's like a TV series. So the Americans are willing to sit there hour after hour after hour hearing speculation. And you get a panel, 18 people, and oh, well, maybe this happened. That could have happened. Well, I don't know. And then the networks send all of their commentators out there, anchors. I mean, I was clicking around last night before I went on Leland's program, and I don't get involved with analyzing Nancy Guthrie because that's not what we do here. But I noticed that Jake Tapper was standing next to a cactus, and I had trouble telling them apart. Little jest. Anyway, they're out there, but they don't have anything. So they have to kill airtime. If they eat it, they don't know what to say. So they say it over and over and over and over and over. Now, I went through this when John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane went down in Long Island Sound. It was exactly the same thing. So he goes up with his wife and his wife's sister from Jersey. He's trying to get to Martha's Vineyard, and boom, the plane goes down. And nobody knows why or where. There's fog and this and that. Everybody's watching the show. And I'm doing the factor. And I'm going, we don't know anything. And no, yeah, and the segment's rated. That means more people would watch than usual. That's what's happened with Nancy Guthrie. So all the television shows or news shows coming up, more people watch. It drove me nuts. I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm going, what am I supposed to ask these people? They don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. What are we supposed to talk about for 8 minutes? Oh, you'll think of something. That was the answer. You'll think of something. I didn't think of something. So I got to the point now, because the Kennedy thing went on and on and on and on. All right? I got to the point where I just tell the audience, look, so many people are interested in this story. We have to do it. And I racked my brains to find creative angles and different ways to do it. Couldn't do it. It was just the same old stuff every day. That's what's happening now. One more thing. I feel terrible. I know Savannah a little bit. She's very, very respectful to me. And I think about my own mother, because my mom lived alone for a little while, and somebody coming in and dragging her out of there, and so that emotional attachment is there. And the only thing that we can do, if you're religious, is pray, and I'll offer Mass for the Guthrie family on Sunday. But it is it's one of these things. So thank you very much for watching No Spin News tonight. I'm Bill O'Reilly. We'll see you again. A lot of breaking news today, and it's a big picture situation. The one that's not that important is Senator Mark Kelly. A judge ruled, federal judge, that Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, cannot discipline Kelly for the comments he made about unlawful orders. You remember Kelly and a bunch of others say, you don't have to obey him, which was certainly subject to sanction. But we live in a country where there are plenty of judges, and one that made this ruling was an Obama appointee that hate Trump. And anything to do with Trump, they're going to rule against it. I don't know if the government's going to appeal. I wouldn't. Kelly, for most of his life, was a patriot. I've lost respect for him now. He fell into that hate Trump barrel, and that's what's kind of destroyed him in my eyes. Also, the Senate is not going to advance the funding bill for Homeland Security. They needed 60 votes. That's the filibuster. And that went down. Okay, so I think they got 52. And this is by design. So we'll tell you about what's going on in Minnesota in a moment. But what the Democratic Party's strategy is now is to create as much chaos in the government as possible going into the midterms. So it doesn't matter if it's good or bad for me and you. Nothing matters other than just blow it up, blow it up, blow it up, make Trump look like he is incompetent and the government's out of control. That is what is happening. There's no reason to deny Homeland Security funding. It's dangerous. What are the Democrats? Only one Democrat said no to that, John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, the senator. And I respect Fetterman now. I kind of, in the beginning, thought he was a little weird, but now I got to know him a little bit. He's a man of principle. But one Democrat? Come on, this is ridiculous. All right, if you want to beat the Republicans in November, Democratic Party, do it on the issues. Don't do it backdoor, creating all kinds of chaos is bad for the American public, but that's what you're doing. Now let's take the SAVE Act, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. All right, so this is an act that says you have to be an American citizen to vote, which is already on the books. If you vote in our election, you're not a citizen, that's a crime. Okay? And in order to prove that you're an American citizen, you got to show an ID. When you register to vote, when you go to the polling place, when you mail in your ballot, whatever it may be. And it's called the SAVE Act. Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. It passed yesterday in the House, 218 to 213. Only one Democrat voted for it, Henry Cuellar of Texas. Only one. So you're going, wait, everybody knows that an ID in a situation where there are limits, okay, there are limits, and the limit here is if you're not an American citizen, you can't vote. The situation buying tobacco and alcohol has got to be 21. It's on and on and on. When there are limits, you have to prove who you are. No, Democrats don't want that. Roll the tape.
The Save America Act is not an isolated piece of policy. It is part of a concerted effort by the Republican Party's leadership and this administration, this president, to centralize partisan power over American elections, to diminish the authority of American states, to once again stoke fear and mistrust of immigrants and in our electoral system, all for the partisan gain of Speaker Johnson and the White House this November.
Oh, bull. That's so much garbage. I can't even, it's about, the guy hates Trump and the Republican Party. Okay, we got it. Diminish the power of the states. Only 11 states have mandatory voter ID laws. Only 11. And 14 states have nothing. You can walk in and vote. You don't have to show anything. These are the ones that are most permissive. California, of course, Oregon, Nevada, New Mexico, Minnesota, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Hawaii. Almost all Democratic states there. A couple of, in the middle, but I mean, that's just crazy. You can just walk in the street, walk into the polling place, vote, and nobody's going to know. Come on. Anarchy. Okay, so a Pew survey last August, 25, said that 83% of Americans support voter ID. And a lot of Democrats in that 83. And then another one in October, Center Square Voters Voice Poll, I don't know what that is, says 71%. All right, so it's overwhelming that Americans, common sense, yeah, you got to show an ID to vote. But no, Democratic Party, no. We're not going to have it. Chaos. Okay? So what happens now after the Department of Homeland Security doesn't get any money? Well, it shuts down on Friday midnight. Not ICE. ICE is funded. Okay? But the Department of Homeland Security shuts down. So if there are bad guys lurking, that gives the bad guys an advantage. And they'll work something out. This is all about the Democrats grandstanding. Oh, we're for the migrants, and we don't want. But you have to understand something. And I've been doing this analysis now for the last week. There are about a third of American voters that don't want any immigration enforcement at all. That's way up. Now, they bought into the propaganda that friends and neighbors and the poor people and little children, they bought into all that. But about 30%, man, a lot of people. Yeah, come on in. Come on in. Everybody in the world. Everybody. And we went over this yesterday. And if you aren't a premium or concierge member of BillO'Reilly.com, we can't give you transcripts, but we do have the shows you can watch. We went over how many nonviolent offenses there are because the propaganda is only 14% of foreign nationals that ICE has rounded up are violent criminals. Drug dealers who sell fentanyl, not violent. Child pornographers, not violent. On and on and on. You can steal as much as you want, no violence. You can run somebody over with your car. Run somebody over with your car, not violent. And they know that. The Democratic Party knows that it's a very narrow sliver, okay, of violent crime that they're talking about, 14%. Murderers, rapists, very serious assaults, that kind of thing. And I'm sitting there going, this is the biggest lie. I wrote a message of the day on BillO'Reilly.com. This is the biggest lie in the world. And they know it, but they justify it as we hate Trump, so we're going to say anything. And no matter what we say is okay because we hate Trump. The final thing, if you are interested in accuracy and having facts at your disposal, please become a concierge member of BillO'Reilly.com, because everything I say right now is transcribed and you get it free. So you can build like an archive. And then if you are involved with any kind of political debate, or you want to convince somebody, or your kids are nuts, or whatever it may be, you've got it there. And we back up everything we say. So you might consider that. So as of now, Department of Homeland Security is not going to be funded after tomorrow midnight. In Minnesota, the border czar, Tom Homan, says their work is done, okay? So they're pulling out most of the ICE agents. And they have arrested 4,000 people in Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area. 4,000. Not all of them are violent or fall under that category, but that is a lot of people. All right, so here's what Homan said today. Go.
We have a lot of work to do across this country to remove public safety risk who shouldn't even be in this country, and to deliver on President Trump's promise for strong border security and mass deportation. Law enforcement officers drawn down from this surge operation will either return to the duty stations or be assigned elsewhere.
It was a smart move by the Trump administration, trying to bring down tensions. Of course, Walz, the governor of Minnesota, comes right out. I want everybody out of here. You know, if it were me and I'm president, I'd go after Walz and Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis. You can't do it now. You got to wait till the tensions come down, but I go after them for insurrection. I might not win that. If I'm the president, the Justice Department might not win it, but it's worth the bet. It is worth it, because these guys, Walz, oh my, he's almost vice president. This guy. And I knew they were going to do this as soon as the Trump administration, and they didn't surrender so much. They just said, not worth it. And I called for very early on a much lighter touch from ICE. Those two people who were killed, that was the fault of Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, who, as he had provided a cordon of security around the ICE agents with local police, which he should have. That was his sworn duty to do, to protect public safety. Okay, those two people would be alive today, because the cops would have kept the protesters away, physically away from the ICE agents. So Fry did it. It's on him. Okay. New poll, NBC News, about changes to ICE. Here we go. 22,000 people. Wow. Big poll. 22,000. First question, in your opinion, should the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency be allowed to continue operating in its current form, or be reformed or abolished? All adults. These are not registered voters. These are adults. Okay? Continue in its current form, 29. Reformed, 42. Abolished, 29. That was my 30% figure that I gave you earlier in the program. 30% of Americans just don't want anything. Go ahead. I can't even wrap my mind around that. Democrats continue in the current form, 2. Reform, 50. Abolish, 48. Independents continue, 14. Reform, 55. Abolish, 31. Republicans continue in its current form, 71. Reform, 24. Abolish, 5. Okay. So there you go, big split. Everybody knows that. In America, the two political parties couldn't be further apart. There's very little détente on anything, and there's a lot of hatred. Now, I'm not in that crew. Okay, I don't hate Democrats. The radical left, I don't hate them, but I want to see them contained. And that means using the law to do it. Okay? So if I have some pretty far out there left-wing friends. I avoid a lot of the political talk with them, although I will mock them if they say something ridiculous. And how I mock them is just putting the fact out. All right, that kind of thing. But I'm not a hater, but I do recognize a dramatic change in this country where it used to be Democratic Party were run by, Tip O'Neill and people like that, JFK, the Kennedys. They were reasonable. Not anymore, because their vision of America is so far from my vision. I believe that traditional America led us to become the strongest, most prosperous nation in the world. They want a totally different, they don't want any tradition. They want to just do it over. That's the rub. Now I'm going to give you an example of how crazy this is becoming. So Louisiana is a red state, conservative state. But the U.S. District Court down there has all kinds of judges, and one of them, appointed by Barack Obama, is named John de Gravelet. John de Gravelet. That's John. John lets out 4 violent foreign nationals from confinement. They're horrible people. And he lets them out because, there they are, 2 men have murder convictions. I mean, they're all really dangerous guys. So here's why he let them out. They were unlawfully detained, says the judge, without any plan for deportations or in the reasonable future. Okay. They're dangerous people. They're in the country illegally. They have committed heinous crimes. I'll give you one. Luis Gaston Sanchez. Okay, and this guy is now on the street. Cuban, convictions for homicide, assault, 2 counts of robbery. Okay? But he's still here because Cuba won't take him. So how do you put him back there? And the judge let him out. Oof. All right. That's what traditional Americans are up against, these judges. So I was on News Nation last night on Cuomo, but Cuomo wasn't there. So there was a substitute guy, Jesse, and he's good. But I was way back in the show, which usually I'm not. And I don't care one way or the other. I'm a mercenary at News Nation. I mean, they hire me and I do the best I can for them. So I watched News Nation leading up to my appearance. 7 o'clock, Guthrie, about a half hour. 8 o'clock, Guthrie, 35 minutes. 9 o'clock, Guthrie. Every cable station. Guthrie, 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 Guthrie. Because people are interested in it. As we said yesterday, mystery, Savannah Guthrie is famous, mom. All right. I feel so sorry for the correspondents out there. Because they got to fill all of this airtime and they don't know anything. All right, so they're standing in front of the house and the anchor's going, well, what do you make of this? And whenever you hear an anchor person say, what do you make of it? Whenever you hear that, you know the person is too lazy to formulate a question. Okay, never hear me say that. I got questions. What do you make of that? Come on. An 8-year-old could do that. Anyway, you got the correspondents out there And, what about we found a glove and then how does the correspondent doesn't know? Well, maybe it was somebody from Mexico, like maybe it was Godzilla. You know, it's like crazy. And the correspondents have got to vamp. This is their job. They got to fill the time. And I'm sitting there going, ooh, because I know this. This is my world for decades. Live shots, explaining. But when I did it, I had facts. I could tell you about the story. There's no facts. Okay, well, there's a videotape. How many times have you seen that videotape? 35,000 times? And they loop it. We didn't get it the first 34,000 times. Loop and loop and loop. So I feel the pain. I was there. I never did that, though. I never did that. The closest it came was, and I told you this yesterday, was when JFK Jr.'s plane went down in the Long Island Sound. And it was like, what do we say now? Is there a sea monster? It was like, what do we do? And nobody knew. Well, it could have been maybe a submarine. And it's the same thing out in Arizona. I expect this thing to wrap up, you know, but boy, that's a hard job. So be sympathetic to the correspondents, but the anchors realize that they don't know anything. They can't even get a question out. All right. Thank you very much for watching and listening to the No Spin News. I'm Bill O'Reilly. We hope you have a very good President's Day weekend. I'm going to take a lot of naps, and I will see you again